Welcome back to the How to Use Photoshop Actions course. My name is Daniel and this is lesson 4, brush tips. Now, in lesson 2 we went over layer masks and why they're useful and how you can use them to build more specific and better looking kind of effects with your actions on your photos. In this case, with brushes, you can actually change the brush to then change the way that you interact with the layer mask. So, for example, let's just add in we'll just add in something simple on here. Let's say a sort of tea-stained effect, or no, we'll use the sun-stained one because we've used that before. Okay, so this effect here will then create the layer mask. So we click this button down here, and then you can see that the layer mask has been added. So on the layer mask lesson we showed how to invert that, but sometimes you might want to edit by removing. So in this case you'll use the brush and you'll just change the brush color to black. With your brush tool, just make sure you've got it to the size you want it set to. Select the layer mask, and now you can go over this like that. But as you can see, it's not making a huge difference until you go over it multiple times. Now, why is that? The reason why is up here you can see that I've changed the opacity of the brush to 25%. If that was set to 100, which we can do, and then came over here, you can see almost instantly that we're taking away the entirety of that effect. So in this case, sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it isn't. But with this brush setting, we can easily change how much we take away. So 25% is nice because it allows you more margin for error, but also to do a lot of blending work. So you can almost blend this effect out of her hair in this case, or we can delete that layer mask, then we can add a new layer mask on top. We can invert it, so we're working with nothing there, and we've got that brush on 25%, remember. So say we wanted to create a kind of bleached effect on her hair, we can just click over her hair a couple of times, start to build that up, but then we might want to lighten the upper parts of the hair, and we can do that by clicking these areas with different frequencies and kind of just blending it. So you can see how you can start to use this brush setting to change that. We can also change the type of brush that we're using as well. So if we delete that layer mask and then we set it up again, hold on, it deleted the action as well, so let's put that back on and then put the layer mask back on, invert that. Okay, now let's go to a different style of brush. Now Photoshop comes with a lot of different brushes natively installed. This one is a screen tone brush. I'm going to change the size of it all the way up to 511. You can see that this setting here, hardness, is now 100. That's important for later. So you can see that I'm now creating this screen tone pattern, and that's created that pattern there across the image. If you delete the layer mask, obviously, if you delete the layer mask by disabling it or something like that, you can just see that that effect is still intact. So by putting that effect back on, we will then try to do something slightly different. So let's say we put the layer mask back on, and this time we invert it again, and we want to go to a normal brush rather than this screen tone brush. So we'll go with the soft round brush, which is the default brush, but we're going to change that hardness, which is default 0, which means that it's soft, which is why it's the soft round brush. Change it all the way up to 100, or you can just select the hard round brush, whichever you prefer, and just start creating these here. Now you can see that these are not soft in any way, they've got hard edge, and that means that you can create these kind of blocky type circles, especially if you then combine it later with a blur effect. So those are two things that you can do with your brushes. And there are also other things that you can do with the brushes as well. You can obviously enable this. This is the airbrushing kind of style. You don't really need to adjust the flow all that much, although you can. It can be fun to experiment with, especially if you want to use the airbrush style build-up effects with your brushing. But on the whole, I find that I mostly use the hardness effect, or so I go usually 0 hardness or 100. You can go in between, anywhere from 0 to 100 is fine, but I personally usually use one or the other. And also I use, quite often I'll change the opacity of my brush. I don't always use the airbrushing one because we already have the effect, and all we're doing is using the layer mask as a buffer between that effect and our photo. You can just not worry so much about actually having to airbrush, because what you're doing essentially is you're taking a shortcut. So that's what those actions allow you to do in combination with a layer mask and changing the settings of your brush. So those are just a couple of things you can do with your brushes, and like I said, those are the most common things I think you'll be doing with your brushes based on my own experience in photo editing. So in the next lesson we're going to go on to a really cool part, which is chaining. So we're going to be chaining actions together, using multiple actions together. So I'll see you in the next video.